The young Chinese woman stood outside Ethan Carter's gate before sunrise, her fingers white from gripping the leather strap of her satchel. She had ridden 3 days across dry country to reach this ranch. Dust covered her boots. Wind tugged at the edge of her worn coat. Yet she did not move. Neither did the man staring at her from beside the well. Then, she spoke. "My father said you wanted to have children." The bucket slipped from Ethan's hand. Water splashed across the hard ground. For a moment, the only sound was the creak of the well rope swaying in the cold morning air. The words struck a place inside him he had spent 7 years trying to bury. His jaw tightened. The woman lowered her eyes respectfully. "And I said maybe you still do." The ranch seemed to grow quieter. Ethan stepped forward. He was 41 years old. The desert sun had carved deep lines into his face. His hands looked older than the rest of him. Everything about him carried the weight of years spent alone. "Who is your father?" he asked. The young woman swallowed. He was called Liang. The name stirred a distant memory. Many years earlier, Ethan had shared campfires and cattle trails with a Chinese trader who crossed the frontier between settlements. A careful man. A loyal man. A man who always carried charcoal pencils and scraps of paper. "He died 3 months ago," she said quietly. Ethan stared at her. She had straight black hair tied neatly behind her head, dark almond-shaped eyes, a weathered blue woven tunic beneath her coat. She looked exhausted. But she stood straight, like someone who had learned not to ask the world for mercy. The woman opened her satchel. She removed a folded letter. "My name is Mei Lin." Ethan accepted the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Liang's hand. Uneven, patient, slow, the words pulled him back through years he had tried to forget. The letter explained everything. Liang's daughter had nowhere safe to go. She belonged neither to Chinese settlements nor frontier towns. After her father's death, she had been pushed from place to place. Liang asked for only one thing. A season. 1 season of work. 1 season of shelter. Nothing more. Ethan folded the letter carefully. The kitchen felt smaller than before. Sunlight spilled through the dusty window. Mei Lin remained near the doorway. She did not step farther inside. She seemed determined not to take up more space than necessary. "I am not asking for charity," she said. "I can work." Ethan rubbed his forehead. His eyes drifted toward the eastern window. Beyond it stood a lonely oak tree. Beneath that tree rested Margaret, the woman he had once planned to marry, the woman buried before they could build a family. The ache arrived as quickly as ever. Sharp, familiar, unwelcome. "You can stay until winter," he said. Mei Lin bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." That evening she repaired a broken fence without being asked. The next morning she fixed the kitchen door that had been sticking for months. 3 days later she found a leak beneath the water trough. Ethan watched from a distance. He expected complaints. There were none. He expected questions. There were very few. She worked steadily, quietly, like someone trying to earn every breath she took. 2 weeks passed. The ranch slowly changed. Boards were straightened. Tools were organized. Even the old barn seemed less tired. One afternoon, Ethan climbed onto the barn roof to replace loose shingles. A rotten board snapped beneath his boot. The world lurched. He hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through his side. For several seconds he could only stare at the sky. Clouds drifted overhead. Then a shadow appeared. Mei Lin crouched beside him. Her expression remained calm, but her hands moved quickly. "Move your fingers." He did. "Your feet." He did. She nodded. Then she exhaled. A small breath she seemed to have been holding. "You are fortunate," she said. Ethan almost laughed. Almost, she helped him stand. For a brief second her hand closed around his arm. Warm, steady, human, Something shifted inside him, something he immediately tried to push away. That night neither mentioned the accident, but the silence between them felt different. Less like a wall, more like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. Days later they sat beside a small fire outside the house. Stars filled the black sky. Crickets sang from the grass. The desert air carried the scent of sage. "My father spoke of you often," Mei Lin said. Ethan stared into the flames. He exaggerated. She shook her head. No. The answer came so simply that Ethan glanced at her. She met his eyes. Only for a moment. Then looked back at the fire. The conversation ended there. Yet long after she went inside, Ethan remained seated beneath the stars. For 7 years he had looked at the same sky and felt nothing. Tonight was different, and that frightened him more than loneliness ever had. The following week they rode into town for supplies. As they tied their horses outside the general store, Ethan noticed a stranger watching from across the street. Tall, well-dressed. Expressionless, the man never entered the store, never spoke. He simply watched Mei Lin. When Ethan looked again, the stranger was gone. But a chill remained, and before sunset, that stranger would learn something about Mei Lin that neither she nor Ethan knew was about to change everything. The stranger returned 3 days later. This time, he did not come alone. 2 riders followed behind him through the drifting dust. Their horses stopped at Ethan's gate just after noon. The ranch fell silent. Even the chickens near the barn seemed to stop moving. Ethan stepped out from the shade. Mei Lin emerged from the garden carrying a bucket of water. The stranger removed his hat. His face looked smooth and confident, the face of a man used to getting his way. "My name is Alden Graves," he said. "I represent the county land office." Ethan did not invite him inside. "What do you want?" Alden glanced toward Mei Lin. His eyes lingered. Too long. The muscles in Ethan's jaw tightened. "I am here regarding her." Mei Lin slowly set down the bucket. The water inside continued to ripple. Alden removed several folded papers. There is a dispute concerning land inheritance connected to her father. Mei Lin blinked. "My father owned no land." Alden smiled. That is what most people believe. The smile never reached his eyes. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Alden unfolded one document. Liang acquired ownership rights to a small parcel near Black Mesa 22 years ago. Mei Lin stared. The color slowly drained from her face. "My father never mentioned land. He had reasons." Alden folded the paper again. "The property contains a spring." Now Ethan understood. Water, in New Mexico, water mattered more than gold. Alden continued. Several ranchers wished to purchase the claim. "And?" Ethan asked. "And Miss Mei Lin's signature would make matters much simpler." The wind shifted across the yard. Dust rolled through the fence posts. Mei Lin remained very still. "My father never told me." Alden nodded. "Which is unfortunate." His voice sounded polite. His eyes did not. Ethan stepped forward. "If she owns it, then she can decide what happens to it." Alden's smile faded. "Of course." The answer came too quickly, too smoothly. The 3 riders left shortly afterward. Their horses disappeared beyond the ridge. Only then did Mei Lin sit down. The bucket remained beside her feet. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, she looked toward the distant hills. He never said anything. Ethan sat beside her. He was protecting something. Or hiding something. The words came out barely above a whisper. That night, neither slept much. The ranch house creaked softly in the darkness. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards. Ethan lay awake, listening to the wind. His thoughts kept returning to the same question. Why would Liang keep such a secret? Morning arrived gray and cool. Before sunrise, Mei Lin stood outside sketching in her notebook. Charcoal moved across paper. Fast, precise, Ethan approached quietly. She was drawing her father, not from memory alone, from longing. Every line carried care. Every shadow carried absence. She noticed Ethan standing nearby. My father drew when he could not solve a problem. Her eyes remained on the page. I think I understand why. Ethan sat beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt different now. Comfortable shared. The next week brought trouble. 3 cattle disappeared from the north pasture. Fence posts were cut cleanly, not broken. Cut, Ethan examined the damage carefully. Someone wanted him to notice. Someone wanted him angry. By afternoon, he found hoofprints leading toward Black Mesa. A message, nothing more. That evening, he saddled his horse. Mei Lin appeared carrying her coat. "You are not going alone." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. An hour later, they rode side by side through fading sunlight. The desert glowed gold beneath the evening sky. Neither spoke much. The trail climbed steadily toward the mesa. At sunset, they found the missing cattle, tied beside a narrow spring. Water flowed from stone into a shallow pool. Clear, cold, constant. Ethan stared. The spring sat directly inside the disputed property. Someone had wanted them to find it. A voice echoed from behind a cluster of rocks. "Beautiful place, isn't it?" Alden stepped into view. Alone this time. His boots crunched against gravel. His smile returned. The county is changing. He gestured toward the spring. "Water means money." Mei Lin's eyes narrowed. "You brought us here." "Yes," Alden spread his hands. "I wanted you to understand what is at stake." The last sunlight caught the surface of the pool. Tiny reflections danced across the rocks. Everything looked peaceful. Nothing felt peaceful. Alden turned toward Mei Lin. "You can sell the claim." "No," the answer came immediately. His smile weakened. "You haven't even considered it." My answer is still no. For the first time, irritation appeared across his face. The mask slipped. Only slightly. But Ethan noticed. Alden stepped closer. "Your father made mistakes." Mei Lin rose from her horse. "So have you." The air between them tightened. Alden looked from her to Ethan, then back again. Something unpleasant flashed through his eyes. "Be careful." The words landed hard. Not advice. A warning. He mounted his horse. Moments later, he disappeared into the gathering darkness. The spring remained. Silent, waiting, Mei Lin stared after him. Her fingers curled tightly around the reins. Ethan noticed they were shaking. Only a little. Only for a second. Then, she drew a slow breath and steadied herself. On the ride home, neither spoke. The moon climbed higher. Coyotes called from distant hills. When they finally reached the ranch, Mei Lin stopped beside the gate. "There is something I never told you." Ethan turned. Moonlight touched one side of her face. The other remained hidden in shadow. "My father did not send me here by accident." Ethan felt his pulse slow. "What do you mean?" She looked directly at him. "He told me that if anything happened to him, I should find you." A pause. Then another. And he said one more thing. The wind moved through the dry grass. Somewhere beyond the barn, a horse shifted inside its stall. Mei Lin swallowed. "My father believed you were the only man he trusted to protect his grandchild." Ethan stared at her. The world seemed to stop moving. Every sound vanished, even the wind. Then, she placed a trembling hand against her stomach. And everything changed. Ethan did not speak. The moonlight seemed sharper. The ranch gate stood open behind them. Far away, a coyote called into the darkness. Mei Lin lowered her eyes. "My father knew." Her voice remained steady. "He learned before he died." Ethan looked at her hand resting against her stomach. Every thought inside him seemed to collide at once. Who is the father? The question came quietly. Mei Lin lifted her gaze. There is no husband. Ethan waited. She drew a slow breath. My father arranged a business partnership with a merchant in Santa Fe. The man promised work and protection after my father became ill. Her fingers tightened. The promises ended after he learned about the child. Ethan felt heat rise into his chest. Not because of the child, because he already knew the rest. The frontier was full of men who made promises when it cost them nothing. What happened? He left. Nothing more. 2 simple words. No bitterness, no complaints, only facts. That somehow made it worse. The next morning, Ethan rode into town before sunrise. The sky was still dark blue. Rio Blanco slowly woke behind him. Store owners swept porches. Wagons rattled across the street. At the courthouse, he found records connected to the Black Mesa claim. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Alden Graves had already filed ownership requests. 3 different ones, all dated before Liang's death. The man had been planning this for months, maybe longer. By afternoon, Ethan returned home carrying copies of every document. Mei Lin studied them carefully. The kitchen remained silent except for the turning of pages. Finally, she looked up. He expected my father to die. Looks that way. And he expected nobody to challenge him. Ethan nodded. Outside, thunder rolled across distant hill. A storm was building. The next week moved quickly. Lawyers arrived. Surveyors arrived. County officials arrived. The small ranch became the center of attention. Through it all, Mei Lin remained calm. Every morning she worked. Every evening she drew. Every night she placed a hand over her stomach before sleeping. One afternoon, Ethan found a new sketch on the kitchen table. It showed the ranch house, the barn, the well, a garden, and beside the fence stood a small child chasing chickens through the grass. Ethan stared at the drawing. His throat tightened. Mei Lin appeared behind him. I imagined the future. The words hung between them. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Finally, Ethan set the drawing down carefully. Then, he stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny charcoal marks on her fingers, close enough to hear her breathing. I have spent years pretending I wanted nothing. Mei Lin listened. The storm outside rattled the windows. Rain began tapping softly against the roof. Ethan swallowed. I was wrong. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then the smallest smile touched her lips. Not large, not dramatic, just real. The courthouse hearing arrived 2 weeks later. Every seat inside the room was filled. Alden sat at one table. Ethan and Mei Lin sat at the other. The judge reviewed documents for nearly an hour. Witnesses spoke. Survey maps were examined. Records were compared. The room felt hot despite the autumn air. Finally, the judge folded the last paper. His voice carried across the courtroom. The Black Mesa Spring belongs to Mei Lin, lawful heir of Liang Chen. Alden's face went pale. The judge continued. All competing claims are dismissed. A murmur spread through the room. The fight was over. Legally, but not completely. Outside the courthouse, Alden waited near the hitching posts. His expression looked harder than before. He stepped into Ethan's path. This isn't finished. Ethan stopped. Neither man blinked. Around them, townspeople watched from a distance. Alden looked toward Mei Lin, then toward her stomach. A mistake. A serious mistake. Ethan moved 1 step forward. Only one. Yet Alden immediately stepped back. The message was clear, crystal clear. Alden turned and walked away. No dramatic showdown, no final threat. Just a man realizing the ground beneath him had disappeared. Winter arrived early that year. Snow dusted the hills. Frost covered fence posts at dawn. The ranch settled into a new rhythm. One cold evening, Ethan stood beside the fire while Mei Lin sketched quietly at the table. The room glowed with warm light. Outside, wind pushed against the walls. Inside, everything felt different. Not perfect, not easy, just different. Better. After a long silence, Ethan crossed the room. Mei Lin looked up. He placed a folded document beside her drawing notebook. She opened it carefully. Her eyes widened. Employment papers, property partnership papers, and one marriage license application. Unsigned, waiting, Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Suddenly uncomfortable. I thought maybe we should decide together. The fire crackled softly. Mei Lin stared at the papers, then at him. A long moment passed, then another. Finally, she stood. She placed the papers on the table and took his hand. Nothing more, nothing needed. The first snow began falling outside the window. White flakes drifted through the darkness, slow, silent, beautiful. Months later, spring sunlight poured across the ranch. The garden bloomed. The fences stood strong. The old barn finally looked young again. A newborn cried inside the house. Ethan stood beside the bed holding a tiny blanket-wrapped child. His hands trembled, not from age, not from exhaustion, simply because some moments were too large to hold steady. Mei Lin watched from the pillow. Sunlight touched her face. The baby opened tiny eyes. Ethan looked down, then laughed. A deep laugh that seemed to come from somewhere buried for years. Outside the window, a hawk circled above the ranch. The same wide sky stretched endlessly overhead. The same hills, the same desert. Yet everything had changed. Then the baby wrapped one tiny hand around Ethan's finger. And he froze, unable to move, unable to look away. As the morning sun climbed higher over the New Mexico frontier,